Hi, I'm Liam Dann, New Zealand Herald Business Editor at Large, and welcome to this episode of Money Talks. This is a podcast about money, but we're not going to tell you how to get rich, and we're not going to try and pick the next interest rate move. In this series, I'll be talking to interesting New Zealanders about how money has shaped their lives and what they've learned over the years. For today's podcast, I am joined by Guyon Espiner. He's been on our screens for 2 decades in various roles at TVNZ, 3 and RNZ. He's also an author of the book The Drinking Game, and his latest project is a podcast series with RNZ, 30 with Guyon Espiner. Kia ora, Guyon.
Kia ora. Thanks for having me.
Talks.
Yeah, good to be here.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit nervous about this interview. Obviously, there's the reason anyone might be, because you've got a reputation as one of the best interviewers in the country, so that's a reason for anyone to be a little nervous. But I want to address the other one, which is maybe an elephant in the room, and that's the fact that I've known you for about 35 years, I think.
Yeah, and counting.
Yeah, and
not
so
getting any younger, are we?
We've been knocking about together since the days of some fairly loose parties in the mid to late 80s.
You probably remember more of them than I do.
Yeah. So hopefully that just kind of flows through this a little bit when we remember life growing up in Kashmir and Christchurch and all that stuff. But look, let's go back right to the start. And, the way we do this in Money Talks is what are your first memories of having money? Do you remember holding money in your hand?
I do. I remember the $2 notes and the $1 notes, the crinkly brown and purple things, before they replaced those with coins. So that's how far back I go. So I remember that, and I remember doing odd jobs and getting pocket money, and I remember having a savings account that you took to school, and you had a little book and you stamped the money in it. And so those things were around, and yeah, that would probably be my first memory of money.
Yeah. Did you have was it off to the dairy, or did you save for things? Can you remember what you spent pocket money on?
It was pretty much off to the dairy with my
classic New Zealand tale.
With my 2 brothers. I was the youngest of 3 brothers, and you'd go down on a Friday after school and spend your money at the dairy. Yeah.
Do you remember much of the sense of I guess money in the household growing up? I mean, growing up in Kashmir, it's not the roughest part of the world, but through the 80s and 90s, how it sort of was perceived in your house?
Yeah, I do actually. My father was and is a doctor. He's 90 this year and he's still working. And I remember him telling us early that, look, my income's in the top 5% of New Zealand, I think he told me. And it's interesting because I look back and, in those days, the inequality or the difference between, say, a doctor's son and someone who is on, a low wage or even, in some cases, a benefit, yeah, sure, it was different. We were comfortably off, but it wasn't the extremes that you see nowadays. And kids, when we were kicking around at schools, they'd have similar experiences. We had 1 car, no overseas holidays, pretty ordinary upbringing, even though we were comfortably off. So I remember from an early age, my parents wanting to impress on us that we were really privileged to be in that situation, and so that did stick with me. That would probably be my first memory of, the bigger picture about where money sits in society, I guess. Yeah. I mean, and Kashmir High School was an interesting mix of, catchment was right from the top of Kashmir and down into Addington and through South Christchurch. So, when we were going to parties and things, it was a real mix of people, right? It was people from all walks of life. Yeah, absolutely. And my parents had made that decision purposefully. My father went to Christ College. He grew up in a working class family, and he got a scholarship to Christ College as his brothers did, and went on to do medicine, and which they never would have been able to afford if he wasn't able to do that. But he had and still does to a degree a resentment of Christ College, which is, for those who don't know, probably one of the most prestigious schools in New Zealand as a boys' school back then. And he purposefully said, no, state co-ed school for you. I don't want to go near that. And so that probably had quite an influence too. Yeah, I mean, there was you could tell there was a choice made by a lot of families up in those Kashmir Hills. Like some of the kids were bused or biked across town to Boys High or Christ College or St Ede's or wherever. They were, and often on sporting grounds. And I remember quite a pivotal moment in my life at about 10 or 12 where the friends that I was with who were playing soccer and cricket, as we used to call soccer, football now, they went off to the private schools like St Andrews and things, and in the end I didn't, and I went to state school. And I remember catching up with them maybe in my late 30s or so, and they were very, very different people than the kids who had gone to to Kashmir High School, a state co-ed school, and those values and that divergence was really interesting to me. So those values, I think, did shape who you are. They're pretty formative years, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, I think I know the answer to this one a bit, but how much was making money influential in your choices at school, like leading into career choices? If you think through what you did at school and university, was making money ever a big factor?
No, it wasn't. And look, I'll presage that with the fact that I had the luxury of it not being. So I don't disrespect that at all. And you look at someone like, John Key's a classic example, and saying that he'd look through windows of others and say, I really want that. And you get that drive for money. And I respect that. So to a degree, I was in the luxury position of not thinking that. And so I was fascinated in music and literature, and I studied poetry, for God's sake. So I came out of university going, I'm either going to be a poet or a journalist. At least the journalist gets paid. That's what I'm going to do. So no, money wasn't a factor in that. I had drive, and I'm not quite sure where that comes from, and I've had drive in journalism to get places and to do stuff, but money was never a driver for me.
Yeah. I mean, did you think about journalism early, or was it really just, coming out, as we did with degrees that didn't sort of correspond to obvious jobs?
Yes, and realising that I wasn't going to be a rock star.
That's true. Yeah, the band was pretty good. Yeah,
well, because we played a lot, and we were really into that, as a lot of teenage boys and girls now too, which is really cool.
Yeah, the band were pretty good. What were they called again?
It had a couple of names. The Rubber Johnnies was the first name, and then it was called Blue Exit, which sounded a bit like a sort of bad sort of porn movie, but was neither. So names weren't a strong point. But like a lot of kids, I remember, switching from the nerdiest instruments going. I was a trombone player, and if you try to look cool going around Kashmir High School with a trombone case, good luck. And then I discovered that I might have more success with girls if I took up the guitar. It might not have been my sole motivation, but you learn the guitar and you have a friend for life. I still play the guitar and still love that. And your mates get into it too. And mate up the road was a drummer, Ivan, and Stu was the lead singer, and John was the bassist, and Guy was another guitarist, and we had this band, and we'd hang out,
gigs,
play some. Yeah, we'd.
My involvement was I used to organise the hall parties, and take the money and buy the keg for the underage drinkers.
Yeah, I think you still owe me for that, don't you?
Probably.
I know that.
I turned up at your house with a keg which I bought with the profits, and there was only 3 of us there, and we drank ourselves sick before anyone arrived.
Yeah. So they were good times, but the music stayed with me. It was, I suppose, a realisation that, I'm going to have to do something as a career, and my love was and is writing. Really, is the foundation thing for all the journalism I kind of do, and so that seemed an obvious career path. And my brother had gone into it, which provided a bit of a role model.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Obviously, my kid brother Corin, good friend of yours as well, he went into journalism. We're friends with Jack Tame, who was a Kashmir kid a bit younger than us. Producer Ethan points out that Mike Hosking was a Christchurch boy.
He was, I think, Linwood High.
Yeah.
He'll correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. Do you think there was anything, that was sort of, I guess it's that slightly liberal arts thing, and then feeling like you want to do something useful with it?
Yeah, I think that's probably right, and also getting back to your point about whether money is a driver. I mean, I don't think there are many people who've gone into journalism to try and make their riches. So maybe it is a product to some degree of a society, a mini society. Christchurch, your example of fairly liberal, fairly prosperous position, and weren't having to go, gee, where is the next meal coming from? I've got time and space to sit back and analyse society. And so you go down the sociology and psychology and literature sort of route, rather than the, how am I going to generate wealth?
Yeah, I remember we both got these weird electronic word processors, pre-computer, because we sort of came to this realisation around the same time that it was just, gee, what the heck are we going to do? Like coming out of university at that time. And it was a rough time, right? So I read about this a bit, but unemployment was 11%.
That's right, yeah. And I had a brother word processor. I also had a fax machine too. Yeah. But I bought mine with a student loan, which I was paying interest on at about 6.5%. So it probably wasn't a terribly good investment. But yeah, I mean, we tumbled out of university in 91 to 3 when, after the mother of all budgets, and as you say, unemployment north of 11%. So they were tough. They were tough times. I had to work really hard to get into the journalism industry. I remember sending CVs and sort of yellowed clippings to everyone with a post office box, and getting job trials at the Oamaru Mail and the community newspapers up in Auckland, and literally driving around the country trying to get my foot in the door in journalism. So they were tough times. I mean, if unemployment peaked at half that, at the moment we'd probably still say things were pretty rough. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it's probably a symptom of how tough it was. But you were focused on print journalism, right? But it was a case that you couldn't just we couldn't get straight into RNZ or the New Zealand Herald or something. Those were jobs for life. You had to work your way up to those. So where was it you started? Was it Palmerston North? Something?
Yeah, so my first actual, having missed out on a few of those job trials, you'd literally go and work there for a week or two, and then they'd say yes or no, and they said no a couple of times. I got my first job as a sub-editor at the Levin Chronicle in 1994, and I stayed there 3 weeks, and then got my first reporting job at the Western Leader in Auckland here. So that was my first reporting job. And then I worked for the Christchurch Mail, another community newspaper. I didn't start my first real, full, proper journalism job until 1997 at the Evening Post, which doesn't exist anymore, but was a great newspaper, and went to the Press Gallery a year later and spent sort of 14, 15 years at the Press Gallery, going to the Sunday Star Times and then on to TVNZ. Fell in love with politics really at that point.
Do you remember a moment then where you went, I've actually made it now, I'm a journalist doing the proper journalism that I that was my ambition,
Yeah, totally. And it would have been working for the Evening Post and going up to the Press Gallery just after the first MMP government had been established with a guy called Winston Peters.
Yeah.
And he was in coalition with National, and he blew the government up halfway through the term, and that was about a month after I'd started in the gallery, and that was a big historical moment for New Zealand. They literally walked out of cabinet over the sale of Wellington Airport back in August of 1998, and it just blew me away to be part of this historic thing, and I'd started to gather knowledge about politics and a deep interest in it, and so I really felt then that I'd found my calling, and never felt for many, many years after that I was working a job. It was something that I just loved, and I still most days feel like that. Things are a little darker at the moment, aren't they, in the media landscape? We'll probably get to that. But yeah, in terms of a light bulb moment, it would have been that. It would have been going up to the Press Gallery in 98 for the Evening Post, and just realising that political journalism was something that I was really into.
Yeah. Coming back to money a bit, I mean, so definitely not such a factor early on, but, you've made some big steps through a number of different news organisations. And so how much was sort of career / sort of money getting ahead part of those moves?
It really wasn't. It gets discredited now to some degree, but this idea of follow your passions and the money will follow is pretty much what I'd gone to. I did 10 years in newspapers, and Mark Sainsbury came to me in 2003 and said, why don't you, come 8 steps down the Press Gallery corridor and come and work for me at TVNZ. And it was a time where my mother had just died. I'd broken up from a long-term relationship. My life was in a bit of turmoil. And I was also a little bit worried that newspapers might die away even back then, because this thing called the internet was turning out not to be just a passing fad. And I was like, maybe that's not a bad idea. And so I followed that. And for me, it's just been I've never had a big, a 5-year plan. Never had that. I've just been a person who's gone into something and just given it everything, and then I try to leave before I get booted out.
Yeah.
I'm a big one for leaving, not overstaying your welcome. So
before it goes flat, I guess.
Yeah. And so I really respect politicians who do that too. I see them in the ones who do just a short amount of time, but get things done and then they go. And look, it'll happen to me. I'll get booted out at some point. You always do. But that's kind of my strategic plan. Hasn't really been one. I've gone, gee, I really want to do this, or I'd take that opportunity, or when something's come up, I've done that. Morning Report was a good example, going into radio, and then you try and do that. I did it 5 years, and I felt I did 1,000 shows. I thought that's enough. I'm gone, and I'll try this investigative journalism stuff, which I've been doing. So there hasn't really been a career trajectory. Whether that's good advice to others, I don't know.
So a little bit more on the media. You were at 3 on probably their last real current affairs show when that sort of first round of culling began, and it's been bad news for quite some time with that organisation, but tough throughout the rest of the media. How have you found that relationship between the news media turning a profit, and how have you seen it change over the years?
The one constant is that it's always been a struggle.
Yeah.
It's like we've been running from this tsunami for a long time, and you'll turn around and see that your mates have got caught up in it. I mean, even back from newspaper days, there was always a worry that the advertising revenue wasn't going to meet the costs. I worked for TV3 for 2 years, and I think they went kind of bankrupt a couple of times. I remember getting some early morning phone calls from Mark Jennings saying, oh, look, some particular hedge fund had crapped themselves at some point or whatever, and not to worry too much. And with TV3, I remember saying to their number 2, do you see a future for long-form current affairs at TV3? And he said, not really. And that was 2013, and I went, okay. And I was gone, and I went to Radio New Zealand because the Morning Report one had come up. So even back then, I was a bit nervous about TV3's position in the market. But I have to say that it hasn't looked as dark as it has in 2024. This seems different to me with the TVNZ closures and what's happened at News Hub and further afield. And when I look globally at the confluence or convergence of technology, of where the economy's at, where people are at with hyper-partisanship, etc., and social media, it really feels like a bit of a perfect storm that is going to take some weathering.
This is a bit more than just the economic downturn we're going through, right? You can feel a structural change that it's moving very fast.
Yeah, totally, absolutely. And I think that is one of the real challenges for us as journalists, and for us as a society, about what place news and current affairs and discussions and debates are going to have. And I think that's something we're really going to have to grapple with.
Yeah. A bit more of an old world media thing, but you're an author now. I guess I am too. You helped me mentor me through a bit of my writing process and getting a book published. How did you find writing The Drinking Game, and how have you found that sort of process? And I guess let's not beat around the bush. There's not really any money.
No, there's not. Gee, there's a pattern emerging here, isn't there, with me and money? Look, first thing I'd say is that to be a journalist, if you're going to spend your career in New Zealand, you're going to have to pretty much do everything. What we're doing now, I mean, you're a writer, and we're doing a podcast, and we're filming this, and so it is multimedia. And I kind of found the book would be part of that. And it was something I always wanted to do. And I really, really actually enjoyed it. And I had to remind myself, hey, you've got to enjoy this, because it might be, one of the only shots you get at it. And I did enjoy the process of it. It was really cool to have the book out there. I mean, in the tech world that we're talking about, it still is a place for a book that sits on the shelf that you take to the beach with you, that people can fling around and flick through. So there is a permanence there, and I'm proud of the fact that I did that. Yeah, as I say, it was something I always wanted to do. And because it was part memoir, part journalism, part history, it came quite easily. I'm actually working on another one at the moment, which I can't really discuss, but it's the classic second album problem. It is a bit harder to get the second one out. The first one sort of flowed pretty naturally.
Yeah, sure. Another sort of big life money question is how has having your daughter Nico changed your approach to money in your career? I mean, is it, I guess, been influenced your thinking?
Yes, I think, children and mortgage are the big anchors in that, eh?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, you just genuinely feel, look, my first responsibility is looking after her, funding that, and just keeping the lights on as far as that goes. And so when things happen like COVID, and you think, wow, is the media going to collapse? Am I going to be able to go back into work? I mean, that's your sort of first thought. Absolutely, having children does have that impact on it. It probably just makes you a little bit more risk averse for me. Risk averse, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, how I'm always interested in the attitude to risk and money, and when it comes to things like investing or just getting the personal finances into shape. Are you organised on that front?
Organised and disciplined and very vanilla.
Yeah.
I did go into a, what do you call them, a more aggressive fund with my KiwiSaver. I have to learn to stop checking it so often because it's not always good news. But yeah, and I've bought shares like once in my life and then sold them at a loss.
Yeah.
But I'm a pretty low risk guy, and that TV3 example is an example where I'm like, I haven't got a big risk appetite. I wouldn't dream of just leaving a job without another one. I see people do that, and I think, wow, that's impressive. I'm off to go and do something, and I've got a low risk appetite, and that must be baked into the DNA or psychology from way back. I don't know why, but I've got a low risk appetite for in anything involving money.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to a lot of finance ministers. Michael Cullen, for example, he told us on this podcast that he only ever kept his money in bank deposits. He never really got into anything like that. So I guess it doesn't necessarily mean you're it's just I guess if you want to get rich, you've got to take more risk, don't you?
Yeah, which I'm just not prepared to do, and it has never been my aim. But I'm pretty disciplined, and at the moment I'm just utterly focused on trying to pay as much of my mortgage off as possible. So I'm organised like that and fairly disciplined, and I can get by relatively frugally. So I'm not bad with money, but in terms of taking on higher risk projects, I always read these stories at the moment about people being scammed, and I feel very sorry for them. But I'm always like, gee, how did you, got this call from someone saying, oh, we're taking deposits of 200,000, and the guy did a bit of due diligence, and that's all fine. But I'm like, gee, I would have hung up at the, I want your 200,000. Yeah. So I'm probably on the risk scale, if zero's no risk and 10's high, I'm at a 2 or 3 at highest.
I've got a few more quickfire money questions, but just before we get to those, do tell us about 30. Tell us about the how that idea came about and what your goal is there with that show.
I love interviewing. It's a bit of a first love for me, and I've done it from way back, a show called Agenda on TVNZ, and then we launched Q&A with Paul Holmes in 2009, and then the Morning Report thing. So while I've loved doing the investigative journalism, I did want to come back to interviewing, and so I'd been pitching for a while at RNZ to have this show, and I thought, what's a slight tweak on this? And I thought, let's call it 30, just 30 minutes, and let's make it uncut. So what we film is what you get. And part of that was to address this declining trust in media thing, that the idea that everything's manipulated or edited out, or you've somehow fooled us. We thought that the idea of an uncut interview, while not extremely novel, and every live interview is obviously uncut, that would be a good thing to do to improve trust in the media, I suppose. And so it's cool. It's a collaboration in some respects. RNZ fully funds the program, but we film and pay to use the studio at Whakaata Māori, and they have their studio set up there, so we record it there, and it's going out on TVNZ on demand now too. So it's a classic example of, I think a minister of broadcasting recently said, oh, well, they have to innovate, and gee, I think we all are.
Yeah.
Like this example of what you're doing now, and we're doing that with 30 and collaborating with 2 or 3 media organisations along the way.
Well, good luck with that. Here's some quick fire money related questions. What's the poorest you've ever been?
Probably, I was on the benefit after university. we talked about that, nearly 12% unemployment in the early 90s. And I hate to say, I remember being in a shopping queue, and there was a sack of potatoes in the trolley, and I was thinking, it was just sitting there, and I was thinking, should we just wheel it out? It didn't. It didn't do that, but because we had no money at all, and so we did pay for it, just to get that on the record. But the early 90s.
It was $108 or something. It wasn't very much money, was it?
No. And I mean, I hear some politicians say, a free ride's over for beneficiaries. And I think, gee, imagine living in Auckland on a benefit, man. That'd be pretty tough. Yeah, I mean, I think you referred to it in your book as Jim Bolger's surf team, which is a great phrase. And there was a bit of that, I got to be honest. I mean, we were probably a bit slouchy bogans to some degree, but there certainly wasn't a lot of loose cash flowing.
No, and it does start to get you down after. It's not a good. You can sort of think, this is the life if you're a young kid for a few months, and then it starts to sort of eat at you.
It really does, and it worries me too. Maybe getting off topic, but it worries me when you see the kinds of layoffs that we're getting at the moment, because it's not just a job is such a big part of your identity and self-worth, isn't it? So it's not just that and the money coming in. It's the whole convergence of things, having no money and having nowhere to go and nowhere to feel valuable on. So that was a pretty good lesson.
What's the most indulgent purchase you ever made?
I bought my daughter a $95 record last week. Yeah. Does that just about count? Most of my purchases have shifted to her. It's pretty cool watching a 10-and-a-half-year-old play vinyl, I have to say. But look, when I was at TVNZ and I was single at that point with no kids, I used to spend a lot of money on clothes. Yeah. Clothes would have been my indulgence. I don't nowadays, but I loved buying suits, and I loved wearing and buying suits. I love that about TV reporting, actually. To be honest, that's the vain side of it. I did love that. So probably getting maybe a Ted Baker suit for like $1,400 or something like that. Yeah. I've never been a car guy or anything like that. You did convince me to buy a fairly flash Riga turntable.
I suppose. Yeah.
It's pretty good.
But the hobbies haven't really, when you think about it, a lot of the stuff, you might have a little bit more money, but it's the same sort of stuff we might have bought years ago, right?
It is.
Music, books.
Yeah. I bought a guitar for my 50th birthday because no one bought me a present, so I went out and bought a new electric guitar. But that'll last me for a few decades. So it's the same stuff. A lot of it related to music.
Our Prime Minister, Christopher Luxon, perhaps slightly sort of misunderstanding the question or whatever, told people in the election campaign that he spends $60 a week on his groceries. How much do you spend, ballpark? Is it a big difficult shop for you?
Yeah, it is. I spend about $180, something like that, and pretty careful with that. So I'm in a situation where I'm separated and have care of my daughter every second week. So when she's with me, I spend more.
Yeah.
Look, it's been a really tough couple of years on food stuff. Just watching people in the supermarket pick out the cucumber and then see the $7 price tag and put it back. And that's the reality for even a lot of people who'd consider themselves middle class. So it's been pretty tough. So I watch the pennies pretty carefully. I make a lot of my own food. Yeah. I try and save money like where I can on that stuff. So, I know it's fashionable to go the other way after the smashed avocado years and the don't buy the coffee, but I am that guy. I'm that guy who makes his lunch and hits the work coffee machine and tries to save where I can, just to give it all to the BNZ to hose down the mortgage.
Yeah. Do you imagine winning Lotto? And if you do, how much would you imagine winning?
I do imagine winning Lotto, which is ridiculous given I never buy it.
Yeah.
But I still do imagine winning it. I wouldn't want to win more than 10. I'd like to win somewhere between 5 and 10. and it'd be paying off the mortgage, maybe being able to set something aside for my daughter, and buying a few new guitars and endless pairs of Y3 trainers, I think.
Yeah. Sounds pretty good. Okay, so last question is kind of a big solve the world kind of question. If you were Prime Minister for a day or dictator of New Zealand or something like that, what would be one thing that you'd prioritise to try and, I guess, fix things, solve equity issues, address economic inequality?
So I'm Prime Minister. Do I have to ask Winston first, or can I just do it?
No, we'll give you an outright.
I'll just do it.
Outright control, yeah.
Okay. It'd be housing. I'd whack on a capital gains tax, not because I'm a lefty. I'm not particularly. I'm with the IMF on this. I would introduce a capital gains tax, and I would do as much as I could about housing. The idea that we've sort of made a retirement investment scheme for boomers and others, I just think is crazy. It's a priority one for people having somewhere to live. I'm a property owning democracy guy. I think home ownership is really important. So I'd do whatever I could to make it a fairer playing field on the housing front. Would be what I'd do.
Sounds good. Guyon Espiner, good luck with the rest of the 30 and the rest of your investigative work. We'll see you probably next week or so hanging out somewhere. But anyway, cheers,
good.
Guyon.
Thanks very much for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Money Talks. If you want to get in touch, drop me a line at liam.dan@nzme.co.nz. And you can read more from me at nzherald.co.nz. Thanks to my producer, Ethan Sills, and sound engineer, Leanne McDonald. Follow Money Talks on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts, with new episodes available every Thursday.